we just saw and heard the Denver Nuggets, heard from the Denver Nuggets, saw a little bit of them in action. They are going to the NBA Finals. I'm excited for the Nuggets. They were the best team for most in the Western Conference, best team for most of the season. And we kept waiting. A lot of us kept waiting for something to happen that didn't happen. They handled Minnesota in round one. They handled Phoenix in round two. And they easily dispatched the Lakers in round three. They've got a two-time MVP. They got an elite number two in Jamal Murray. They've got really good role players. They got good defenders. All of this stuff. And yet, J.A., I think Michael Malone wasn't just talking about writers. He may have been talking about the basketball public when he said, I'm going to put we in there, we are a little silly and somewhat ignorant. Because you want to talk about a new narrative. The new narrative is, the Denver Nuggets in the NBA Finals, most likely against the Miami Heat. That would be market number 16 versus market number 18. It may be aesthetically pleasing, but it's not great for the bottom line. And as a great artist from Denver once sang, that's the way of the world. Plant your flower, plant a flower, you get a pearl. Okay. Hey, Philip Bailey. All right, look, that's the way it
I didn't
goes.
know he was from Denver. Oh, shout out to Denver. Okay.
Shout out Denver. Shout out Denver.
Right.
Philip Bailey.
That's the way of the world. Right. And this is the world. I'm going to quote from the movie Network, which was made in the 1970s and still holds up incredibly well today. It's a movie that really predicts the rise of reality television, the problems with corporate ownership of media, all of that, right? And there's a speech that Ned Beatty gives. Ned Beatty basically, he got nominated for the Best Supporting Actor for 6 minutes. That's all he's in the movie. He delivers a speech, an all-timer. You talk about that's the way of the world.
No question.
It's a similar theme. He says, we no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. And that's what we're talking about here. This is not the greatest for business. It is great for basketball. It's great for this idealistic notion that no matter where you are, no matter what you do, where you play, you too can have a chance to play for a championship. I love the fact that it's old school in the notion that these are now two of the longer tenured coaches out there. When you talk about Eric Spoelstra, who I think is number 2 to Greg Popovich, and Mike Malone's been in Denver for a while. The fact that they stayed the course and that they have built this, I would argue, I was thinking this morning, the fact that Denver and the Nuggets are a little bit off the radar probably helped and is one of the reasons Mike Malone still has this job. Because there was less scrutiny on them. Some of their playoff shortcomings were not blown up to be emergencies. So I think he benefited from that. But he needs to realize that, yes, there is a reason why it would be better for the league to have LeBron James and the Lakers and the Celtics in the finals. They drive the TV ratings. The TV ratings are what's responsible for increasing the network contracts that are paid for the rights to the NBA. And that's what makes this whole thing work. Right?
Yeah, I know. And it's so, and it's tough. It's tough because generally you can have one market like Denver. As long as you have, and you were covering these teams, you were there. I know you weren't on the beat at the time, but you were a columnist. 97, 98, when you have Michael Jordan taking on Chicago, media market, number 2 or number 3? Chicago taking on Utah, so low on the market I can't even count. Probably somewhere in the 20s.
But you had Michael Jordan. It didn't matter. And to date, the most watched game ever, Jordan in Game 6. That's the most watched NBA game ever. And it came when the Bulls won their 6th championship in 8 years. So the opposite of democracy, right? That was imperial what the Bulls did. And guess what? The fans loved it. The fans love dynasties. They love watching greatness. You don't think they'd rather see LeBron again? It would be a better storyline. It would attract more interest from the public to see LeBron trying to get one more than trying to see Jokic break through. Now, in the long term, it will be better because Jokic can validate himself. Jokic can become a superstar in his own right, and he's played like a superstar for several years now. But he hasn't all the trappings of superstardom, right? Same as Giannis.
Yeah.
Giannis was a two-time MVP who kept going out early in the playoffs, realized he needed to get better. His best wasn't good enough, got even better, won a championship, and now you see him a lot more in commercials. I think we'll see a lot more of Jokic if he goes on and wins this championship and gets the Bill Russell Finals MVP.
And you know what? This is really, this goes beyond basketball, man. This is like, this is some life stuff here, J.A. We try to tell, you probably tell your students, I tell my students that it's not really about the glitz and the glamour. It's about substance. It's about substance. Like what's between your ears. That, forget about all the superficial stuff. But the network stories tell a very superficial story. It's a very superficial
It's show
story.
Business.
I mean, it is.
At the end of the day, it is show business. It's a show and it's business.
That's right. I mean, the Nuggets play a great brand of basketball. They really do. And I want to shout out, I have this in the feed, I need to shout out old school. They're standing on some mile-high shoulders, these Nuggets. Some of these old school Nuggets who were entertaining. I grew up watching some of these teams. I knew they were never going to get to the NBA Finals. They didn't play a lick of defense, but they were so much fun to watch. They were fast-paced. Alex, so at one point, they had 3 20-point scorers on the same team. You had Alex English, Kiki Vandeweghe, Dan Issel, all averaged 20 points plus in a season. They only won like 44, 45 games because they'd score a bunch and they give up a bunch. They were usually good for a first or second round exit, but after them, Fat Lever in there.
I was about to give my shout out to Fat Lever, who pop up and get a triple-double now and then, too.
Mess around. 6'3", 6'4", getting a triple-double. A guard getting 20 rebounds.
Michael Adams jacking up shots.
Michael Adams. How about another dude? They had an old-school dude who used to come off the bench. It was a gunner. I think his name was Mike Evans. Is that right? Or maybe am I getting him confused? Mike Evans, right? Used to come in and fire it up. I like some of their defensive specialists. They had T.R. Dunn. They had Bill.
So T.R. Dunn played in the highest scoring game ever, right? So that highest scoring game was that Nuggets against the Pistons triple overtime. He scored like 6 points. 2 or 4 points. And I used to tease him like, how you gonna play in the highest scoring game ever and scoring single digits? But he was a defensive specialist. They needed one on that team, right? Couldn't have everyone scoring 20 points. Somebody had to play defense. That was T.R. Dunn. Theodore Roosevelt Dunn's responsibility.
But what would you do? Okay, what would you do in this situation? I'm talking about this great brand of basketball, and the people want the stars. They want a certain kind of star too. They want established stars, because I don't think the Milwaukee Phoenix series, which was a great series, went 6 games. Phoenix won the first 2. Milwaukee wins 4 straight. Giannis 50 in Game 6. Great series, and it's Giannis. I don't think that did well ratings-wise compared to some of the other, Warriors. I know it didn't. Warriors, Cavaliers. Right. Even though that started off as a nice little rivalry. Warriors win the first one. Cavaliers come back from 3-1 down to win it. Then after that, when they got Durant, those were not really competitive series.
But you still have star power. Right.
But what would you do if you're the commissioner? Say, you were a commissioner. Forget about Adam Silver. Adam Silver is now, he's going to step aside. J.A. Adande is going to take over for 2 years. You'll be commissioner for 2 years. Would you, and let's be honest here, would you consciously think about getting stars, positioning stars to play in the finals? Would you change
here's what I wouldn't do
to make sure you got a star?
I would do the opposite of what they've done, which is they're trying to basically make it financially impossible to put together another Warriors type run, right? And to bring in a Kevin Durant on top of Steph Curry and a Klay Thompson. They're going to make it so punitive with the luxury tax, and they're also going to affect what you can do on the margins, right? So in addition to not being able to bring another superstar, you're not going to be able to bring it in like a mid-level exception guy. They're going to make it so that if you're above certain luxury tax levels, you can't participate in the buyout market, right? Which is how, say, the Miami Heat when they brought in Chris Anderson off a buyout, the Birdman, and he played a pivotal role in helping them get to one of their championships when LeBron was in Miami, right? So all these little things, I would not punish the teams that have done the most to make your league a viable entertainment product, right? The teams that are not tanking, the teams that are actively going out there and trying to amass as much talent as possible, because that's traditionally what has driven the league. The Bulls, the Lakers in the 80s, Shaq and Kobe,
Celtics,
the Warriors recently.
Them,
these super teams, the Miami Heat were great for business. And all these teams that complained about, oh, you know, it's collusion. It's not collusion when the players get together to do it themselves. It's collusion when teams do something. But no one complains when the Miami Heat came to town and you sold out your building, right? Do you think anyone complains when the Golden State Warriors come to town and you sell out your building? Anyone complains? They're certainly not complaining in the offices of Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN is, when the Warriors are driving up their TV ratings, right? So these things are all good for the overall benefit of the sport. More money comes into the sport. Is it good for the competitive balance of the sport? Not necessarily. But tell me when the NBA has ever been driven by competitive balance. When you think of the golden eras of the league, it hasn't been competitively balanced.
Oh my God. Listen, J.A., this is the most balanced the NBA has been in decades. I mean, if you just look at the 1980s, forget about it. You had like 3 teams. Yeah, they pretty much should have had their round robin. It was the Lakers, Celtics, Sixers, and throw the Rockets or somebody a bone. But pretty much these teams, if the Celtics weren't representing the East, it was the Sixers. And if the Lakers weren't representing the West, and the Pistons, sorry, Detroit.
1980 to 1987.
Let me throw Detroit in there, because when you, if you ignore the Pistons even for a little bit, even just for a second, wait a minute, see, we're not getting our respect, we're not getting our props. Sit down, Isaiah. I didn't forget you. Okay, all right, Lane Beer, we got you. But really, it was Detroit.
But it took them the whole decade
Boston,
to break through.
Yeah,
and Philly.
But really, Boston,
that's
Philly,
it from
Detroit.
80 to 87 out of the East. Right.
That's it.
And in the West, it was the Lakers and the Rockets got through a couple times.
Lakers and Rockets,
The Rockets got through a couple times. The Spurs were there, and the Nuggets, those rainbow, city edition jersey Nuggets, the skyline, those Nuggets, they I wouldn't even say they knocked on the door. They wiped their feet on the mat. They didn't even get to reach out and knock on the door. They were in the front lawn. The Nuggets were in the front lawn. But they were fun to watch. That's why I'm so happy for them. But you know what? But when we got to money time, it was time for the Lakers and the Celtics. That's what CBS was paying the money for.
They were the scheduled opponent. They were the scheduled, entertaining opponent, but they really weren't on the verge of kicking in the door.
In wrestling.
That's right.
S.D. Jones. He wasn't about to win the championship, but you'd see him every Saturday, right?
So I can't wait to be pleasantly surprised as we wrap this and talk about I'd say tantrum is not the right word. It wasn't a tantrum last night. It was an emotional moment. I'm going to define it as an emotional moment. We will talk about that on the other side of Denver Lakers. We talked about Denver, but there's a Lakers storyline where I say it was a very emotional moment after the game. We should not read too much into this emotional moment, J.A. Adande. Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.